So, I have this quote with me. I wrote it down myself. It says, "A happy childhood is what every child hopes for. The abuse, the hurt, and the loss are all the things that come with being human. However, these things often cause lifelong damage and need healing, for if they are not healed, the products of thereof are angry adults, abusive adults, as well as adults who are hurt, who often hurt other people." Hey everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Dobego Mzelemo, and today on the episode of Insightful Fridays, we are going to be talking about childhood traumas. And on that point, what childhood trauma do you have? Maybe someone said something to you that still even lingers in your brain. It is telling you maybe to not be your best self. I don't know. But today I'm going to be talking about that and how we can deal with it and maybe maneuver our lives behind it and maybe get some healing. But the one ultimate advice I'd like to give even before we start on this topic is that going to therapy really helps. There are some free counseling tools and everything that can help. So let's get into the video. The first question that I'm gonna ask is what it means to be a child. From the point that I stand right now, I'm 21 years old. I'm looking at what it means to be a child and remember how my childhood was. For me, being a child meant being happy. It meant being carefree and not worrying about who's gonna say something hurtful to me or who's gonna say I'm not enough in any way. I remember that as a child, I wouldn't say I was a sad child. But I was a very insightful child. I had bright ideas that would often help when they were taken. But as I grew up, seeing that some of my ideas were being ridiculed by family, some of the family members that I had. But for me, being a child, it meant being this ingenious person who had awesome ideas. You remember what it is being a child. When you are a child, you feel as if there is nothing in the world that can stop you in becoming who you want to become. I remember that when I was in primary school and we were asked what we wanted to be, people wanted to be pilots, people wanted to be astronauts, people wanted to be doctors, and people wanted to be these so many things that are so great and seemed that they were achievable at that point. But as we grew up, something dimmed our light, something made us feel as though we were not enough and maybe our goals were not attainable. So being a child, for me, it meant being unstoppable, that there was no force on the earth or the universe that was gonna stop me from being the best version of myself that I could possibly be when I grew up. There's this thing that everybody says ukuthi ena akusiyona-ke mase ngimdala yami le ngiyiphilayo right now. And I think this is characterized by the things that we are going through, by the things that we thought we're not gonna be at our table when we grow up. But hello, we did not have idle childhoods. At some point, somewhere in us growing up, there were things that happened that shaped us into the people that we are and the minds that we have and the limitations that we have put on ourselves and not becoming the people that we had thought we were going to become or we had dreamed of becoming as kids. And I think very few people realize that when they grow up that they are not becoming the best version of themselves. I think people, when they grow up and into this age, they develop this mindset that, okay, the world has problems, I have problems, therefore these problems are going to stop me from becoming the best version of myself or the person that I thought I would become as a kid. I think very little people pursue their dreams in such an extent that they wanted to be. When you're a child, when you're being asked what your dream car is, you immediately say it's a Lamborghini, it's a Ferrari, it's a Rolls Royce. But as you turn 20, you start realizing, you start fathoning those dreams away from you. When you complete high school, you start thinking about how far those dreams are from you and how unattainable they are. I think we've often focused on how unattainable these dreams are, and not thinking about how attainable they are. We often see people who are doing better than us, people who had grown up, who we think okay, who we think had greener pastures. But the truth is, everybody has experienced some hurt, some trauma, and some challenge at some point. But it's just that the challenges that God put us in way of how we can be able to handle those problems. So for me, being a child, it actually meant being able to achieve anything that I wanted to achieve. Am I still in that space of thinking that I can achieve anything I put my mind to? I am now unlearning the limitations I've put on myself, and I'm learning to not limit myself of the things that I think I can achieve and the person that I can become. I have made some mistakes in life that I think have formed me and forged me into the person that I am, but I also have this mindset that whatever it is that I've done, it was not a limitation, but it was just a stepping stone for me to step onto the person who I want to be and the progress and the life that I want to have. So, the second point is that the love that is needed and is given off from a child. You know, as a child, we all have love. This is evident because as a child, you did not know how to hate people. As a child, you did not know how to isolate, how to separate, and how to tell off how people were supposed to be loved and some were not supposed to be loved. As a child, we are carefree. We have this nature of love and embracing everything with love. That is why, as a child, uhambe uyongena emeveni, because the reason why ungena emeveni, it's because when you think that everything has to be loved. That is why as a child, moyongena emeveni athi umuntu omdala buya lapho uzolimala, or mosuye weni athi buya lapho uzolimala. I think the nature of a human is to love, but the way that the world has been shaped, the world teaches us to hate. The world teaches us to be fearful of things. The world teaches us that there's something called limitations. The world teaches us that there are some things that are not meant to. The world teaches us that there are some things that are not worth being loved. And as we grow up, I think we developed this hate that whatever it is that we want and we need is so far away from love. And I feel as if that is why children hurt other children, because they've been taught a form of hate, and which is not a very great thing. There is something that I think has been looked at on social media about how racism is taught. Not a child, when a child is born, they do not know racism, but racism is taught, whether it's a racism that is in, whether it's tribalism or anything of that sort, but that is taught. Our nature is to love and embrace the world, but the world has made us into who we are. But now I think I'm at a point where I'm unlearning to hate. I'm unlearning to look at some people in a way that I look at them. I'm going to talk about teenage years and damage. I think when we come into our teenage years, there are these changes that occur in our body. We start to look more sexier, more attractive. And as we look at ourselves from a young age, we have learned that there are relationships. And when we present ourselves to those relationships, I have learned that we present ourselves in relationships in a way that we have felt that there is a need that needs to be met. If your parents didn't love you the way you wanted to be loved, you are gonna show up in relationships craving that love. If you are not affirmed, you're gonna show up in relationship craving to be affirmed. If you do not receive gifts, you're gonna be showing up in relationship craving to receive gifts. And this in turn is toxic to us, because we end up sacrificing who we should be for the things that we can obtain from relationships. We often sacrifice our dignity and our livelihood just because we want to get this thing. If this thirst is quenched, then then whatever it is that I'm sacrificing, I'm gonna give from it. And what I think that the enemy uses in most of these things is that if in your mind you decided that, you know what, I'm never gonna get this, so the way in which I'm gonna get it is if I sacrifice myself in a way, is if I give up myself in a way. And the one thing that I think God has taught me is that you need not to give away yourself so that you can gain something. If there is anything that is worth giving yourself to, I think it is the things that grow you, it is the things that transform you, it is the things that better you. If you give yourself unto things that you think that they are growing you, but in turn that they are destroying you, it is very important to be able to look at how things are played out. My teacher who taught me grade 9, he said that life is a game to play wise. There may be someone who said those words, but I heard those words from him. And when he said that, I thought of how life is this game that everybody now has to play, and that everybody, in order for the world to function, everybody has a part to play. But thinking of life as a game, it means that when you are going to think of how I can play someone, of how I can use someone, of how I can play that or betray this or do this. But for me, it made it seem as though I have to do manipulative things so that I can be able to manipulate things and get them into, my own plate. And I do not think that life is a game to play wise, but I think that life is better lived if people find out who they are and what it means for them to be alive. Because when you find meaning into being alive, then you can stop hating yourself. You can stop betraying yourself time and time again. You can stop not loving yourself the way you should love yourself. If you give meaning to the life that you live, then you find out who you're supposed to be and who you are. So let me look at another bullet. Okay. So another thing that I'm going to talk about is mistakes upon mistakes and condemnation from parents. So I think the first thing that you learn as a child that a parent figure in your life teaches you is that there is a wrong thing and that there is a right thing. And in those wrong and right things, I think it comes from a point of the things that they have done that have caused damage to them, and now they do not want that damage to be cast down onto us. And very so often when parents do this, instead of correcting us, they end up condemning us. And when you receive condemnation in a place where you're supposed to receive love and you're supposed to receive correction, it turns out to play negatively to us, because even if we come across things that we need answers for, we think about how we've been condemned and how we've been said to be wrong. For an example, if you ask your parent about sex, maybe you're 5 years old, and you're asking up your mother about sex because maybe you've heard someone else talk about it, or maybe you've watched something, because our kids get exposed at a very young age. Your mother will what I would like to think that a mother would like, where did you get that? What is that? And they start building on this frustration that this child is not supposed to know this. But I feel as though at whatever age that your child comes to ask you sensitive questions, it is very important to address these things in a loving manner, in a tender manner, so that your child may be able to trust you in future questions that they may have. Sometimes you find that a child comes to you asking a question because in their minds they've already thought and decided that they're gonna do that. But if you respond to them with love and kindness, then you stop something that they were gonna do that was going to damage them. So when a child does a mistake, instead of us condemning the child, it is important to correct the child, to come from a place of love and understanding, and seeing that the child has been wrong. But even though the child has been wrong, we ought to correct the child and make sure that they do not repeat their mistakes. And there's something that I've learned, that if you do not learn a mistake the first time, you are going to repeat that mistake until you learn it. So at that point, I'm standing at a standpoint where I'm like, I think it is better for us to pray for our children. Pray for our children that they do not repeat the mistakes that we did. Pray for our children that they do not think that the way that we did, which led us into doing things that in turn damaged us and, made us hate ourselves. So my next point is going to be growth, love, and healing. I think I'm in that phase in my life where I'm growing. I am learning to love myself and I'm learning to heal myself. It is very important to grow. People who stop growing become toxic to themselves. You know, that is why I do not look like a 5-year-old, and I will certainly not look like a 10-year-old because I have been growing. And me physically changing, it means that my mind also has to change, because if I refuse to advance my mind as with the advancing body that I am having, it means that I'm going to do things and justify them with the mindset of being a 5-year-old. It means that I'm gonna say things and try to justify them with the mindset of a 10-year-old. It is very important to grow, because when you grow, you learn that there are things that you are not supposed to say, there are things that you're supposed to address, there are things that you're supposed to change about yourself, and there are things that you are supposed to every day work on. Because when you work on those things, you work on it so that your child doesn't have to work on it. You work on it so that your friend doesn't have to work on it. Very often, all the time, very often, sometimes we think that people who are need to change are our friends, our family, the outside person, and we overlook the need to change ourselves. And it is when we change ourselves that we see that all along the people who needed to change was us and not the other person. A type of growth that you see in your mind that is needed by the other person, it is when you need to change. When you are living in a space where a person is constantly hating you and you're like trying to change them, it is not them that you're supposed to change, it is you. Because when you change, you're gonna learn to remove yourself out of a situation that hurts you. You're gonna learn to remove out of rooms that ridicule you, rooms that look down on you and who you are. So it is very important to grow. And when it comes to healing, healing means distancing yourselves from places that hurt you, distancing yourselves from places that want to stop you from growing. It means that overcoming who you were and becoming this new person. Someone said that knowing who you are is also knowing who you're not, and knowing who you're not means that you remove yourself from situations that are not in that do not resonate with the person that you are. So one thing, I'm now in my 20s, and I've had a lot of talk about what it means to be in your 20s, what you can do in your 20s. And I feel as though that the healing that I need now, that I'm in my 20s, is not going to be the same healing that I will need in my 30s. Because I believe that a person never stops healing. Because if you stop yourself from healing, then the wounds that are inside of you are not going to heal, and they're going to keep on bleeding. Yeah, well, so I am at a point in my life where I am growing to be a better person, growing to be a better version of myself, a better mother, a better sister, a better friend, and a better community member. This for me means that now that I'm in my 20s, I'm learning into who I want to be, who I want to become. Then I think that what I'm doing now in my 20s, I won't need to do in my 30s. In my 30s, I'll be doing something else. I'll be developing myself in another way. I am realizing that having depression at such a young age I'm teaching myself how to live in stressful situations, how to maneuver life in stressful situations. And this in turn helps me to develop a mental intelligence, an emotional intelligence. And this emotional intelligence, I think, is gonna help me in when I grow up. It's gonna help me when I'm in my 30s or in my 40s. And these are just how my 20s are. I'm figuring who I am and the freaking reason why I'm on this earth, and like the things that I still need to do. I'm figuring out myself, my dreams, and the things that I still want to achieve. So it's a lot of things, but it excites me because when I learn about these things, it adds value to myself. It does not subtract. I've learned that there are things that when you do, they subtract value to who you are. So I've learned to like protect myself and protect the very person that I'm trying to become. And it means that I do not take an immature self and put out into the world so that the world can see, but I build this persona, I build this personality, I build this person so that even when I show up into the world, I show up fully clothed in who I am and in not doubting who I'm supposed to be. Because truth be told, there are some places that when you enter, they question who you are. And it is very important that when you are faced with a question of who you are, will you stand firm on what you believe in, and you do not even, like back at it. Like, you stand firm and like you go forward into who you want to be. So thank you so much for joining this video on my channel. We are growing, and it's important that as we grow, we realize that we're growing and we become better people. So what are your points of growth, and what are your childhood traumas, and how did your trauma in your childhood lead you into where you are today and the person that you want to become? Comment down below, and please do like and subscribe. See you on my next video.